I walked into Dante's and immediately saw my friend sitting behind the bar. "Henry, what the hell are you doing in an establishment like this?" "Who are you calling a diner?" It was Dante, and he was working behind the bar. Dante was very attached to his establishment and sometimes had a hard time separating himself from it. "Sorry, it's nothing personal, Dante. I'm just surprised. I haven't seen my friend here in almost a month." "Well, keep your mouth shut, or you can meet your friend elsewhere." "Yeah, Dante, sorry." I threw my leg over the bar stool and lowered myself next to Henry. "Where have you been, kid? I was beginning to think you disappeared off the face of the earth." He looked at me and, taking a deep breath, replied, "Not too far from here, I guess. Bob was staying with me, and to tell you the truth, I was afraid to leave him alone." "Yeah, I heard he finally divorced that bitch. Hell, sounds to me like he should throw a party. Free at last, thank God Almighty, he's free at last." Henry laughed. "He doesn't think so. You know he's been in love with that bitch since they were in college together, right? Heck, everyone who dated her thought she was a terrible flirt. He's put up with it for far too long, if you want my opinion." "Well, he didn't exactly put up with it. He used to complain to me, but he always found an excuse for her behavior." "Not anymore. He's hurt and angry, but he's finally had an epiphany." "So he dumped her? Great. Tell him it's like childbirth. It hurts at first, but there's a big life on the other side, and it's time for him to get it over with." Henry laughed. "Childbirth? Is that your estrogen talking, Paul?" I was laughing now. "Okay, tell him it's like a root canal. It hurts at first." Whoa, I have a dentist appointment this week, and I don't need to think about that." "Okay. Besides, the truth is, divorce is more like hemorrhoids. Alimony payments cause pain that keeps coming back." "Please, no more analogies." My friend smiled, but he looked tired. "Besides, he didn't dump her, she dumped him. He worked at their office in LA for a week, and when he came back Friday night, she was gone. She'd moved out. She took everything of value and practically cleaned out their accounts. What a bitch. No warning, no discussion, not even an email. She just left." "Damn, that's cold." "Sunday night, he showed up on my doorstep and was fucking loopy. Talk about crying into a beer. They'd been married for 5 years, but if you count the year of their engagement and their last year of college, they'd been together for 7 years. And then, without a word, she just picked up and disappeared." "I think he'll be relieved." "Are you kidding? He was insanely worried. She didn't even leave a note. He sat up the first night without sleep, hoping and waiting for her return. The first weekend, he called everyone he knew, contacted the police, but he still didn't sleep. Monday morning came, he called her office, and who do you think answered the phone? The bitch was at work like nothing happened. That's when he lost his temper. He's yelling at her, then thanking God she's okay, and she just doesn't say anything and waits for him to finish. When he finally ran out of breath, he asked her, 'What the hell were you thinking? I was so worried about you. Where have you been?' I just sit there speechless and listen. I mean, I thought she was a bitch, but Bob is a good guy and no one deserves this. You know what she says? Cold as ice, she says, 'I'm sorry, Bob. It didn't work out between us. I want a divorce.' She told him that on the damn phone." Damn, that's cold as ice. That can't be the whole story. Hell no, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Does he already know what happened? Why now? Oh, yes, he knows. She moved in with her boss from work. When he finally tracked her down and confronted her, she was like, "Bob, you've been a good husband, but you know we're not going anywhere. James makes twice as much as you do, and he's getting promoted. He wants to take care of me. We never got along, you and me. I've tried to get out of it, but it's better this way." And blah, blah, blah. Can you believe that? Before I could answer, Ben walked in. "Henry, what the hell?" "God damn it, if you call my place a diner, I swear I'll throw you out of here." "No, I'm sorry, Dante. I just wanted to say to my friend, why the hell are you sitting on that stool? Your fat ass is hanging over the back and both sides. That's all I wanted to say." "Thanks, Ben. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry, Henry, but I think Dante meant what he said. What made him get so excited?" "I have no idea," I said, smiling at that. "He's been acting like that all evening. Henry was just telling me about Bob. Oh yeah, I heard he finally dumped that bitch. Oh shit. I'm going to have to tell the whole story all over again. Look, I can't sit on this damn tiny bar stool all night. If I'm going to be repetitive, I need to eat dinner. I decided it was partly my fault, though now that I think about it better, I'm not quite sure why, so I said, Dante, 3 of the biggest burgers with fries, and we'll take them over there. I pointed to a booth at the other end of the hall. And 3 beers. Nice guy, I thought. I don't think Ben had ever run away from a check in his life. We settled into the booth and Henry began to retell the story. Ben's reaction was similar to mine, with lots of "what a bitch" and "good riddance." About the time we had worked it all out and Ben was up to speed, Jason came over to our table. Henry, what the hell? No! All 3 of us said it together. Don't say it, just don't say it! Jason looked at us like we were crazy. Okay, so what are you guys talking about? Holy shit, I have to go through this again. One of you guys will tell him. So for the 3rd time that evening, the sad story of Bob and his bitch of a wife was told between friends. Once the story was told and Jason was brought up to speed and a few more beers were consumed, we set about finding a way to help our friend out of his depression. Everyone, and I mean everyone around him, thought it was a good thing. We just needed to convince Bob that life would get better, much better, and everything he could want was just waiting for him to reach out and take it. After a few more beers and careful deliberation, or what could be taken as careful deliberation after a few more drinks, we came up with a plan. We would take Bob to the beach for a long weekend, stock the fridge with beer, and have our buddy have sex. We all agreed it was a brilliant plan. It had everything: beach, beer, and sex. Of course, it was the solution to all his problems. The next morning, despite a slight headache and severe dehydration, we continued to think it was the thing to do and started making plans. Despite the obvious genius of our plan, and we all agreed it was genius, we had one major hurdle to overcome before we could put it into action. Henry was single, but Ben, Jason, and I were married, and each of us wanted to keep it that way. We had wives to convince. Have you ever tried to tell your wife that you're taking a friend to the beach for a long weekend without her? Can you imagine how a wife would react to that? I had been married to Cheryl for 8 years and loved her for 11. Like Bob and the bitch, we met in college and have been together ever since. We have 2 kids, 2 jobs, 1 mortgage, 2 car loans. Let's just say that if I'd proposed some nonsense like swinging or open marriage to her, I'd be single and even deeper in debt than I am now. I approached her cautiously. Honey, some guys are thinking about taking Bob to the beach for a long weekend so he can at least clear his head a little and get his mind off his wife. That bitch? Tell him to just forget her and move on with his life. He can accomplish so much more than that whore. My wife wasn't without her opinions and didn't keep them to herself when she thought we could all benefit from her wisdom and experience. So, how are you going to help him move on with his life? She looked at me with laser-like eyes and put her hands on her hips. Well, we thought... You're going to sleep with him, aren't you? Damn, you can't keep secrets from her. The thought had crossed our minds. She thought for a moment and then said, buy him a box of condoms and make sure he uses them. His life is hard enough as it is right now. He doesn't need illness and children to make it worse. I must have had that stupid look on my face that I get whenever she surprises me. What, you thought I was going to freak out? Well, yes, that thought crossed my mind. I trust you. You've never cheated on me before, and you're not going to cheat on me now, right? Yes, baby. You know that's true. And you know that if you ever cheat, I'll make your life a living hell, right? A half smile appeared on her face that spoke. I say that to sound funny, but I'm not kidding. No, I'm not kidding. I walked over to her, put my arm around her waist, and said, honey, I've never met a woman who compares to you, and I know I never will. I have no desire to eat ground beef when I have steak at home. And don't you forget it. Now you make sure Bob stays sober enough to get the job done. And remember, you have a wife waiting for you at home with a zero-tolerance policy. Don't drink so much that you forget where you're regularly fed. Got it? This woman never ceases to amaze me. And just like that, the five of us ended up in a ridiculously large multi-room rental overlooking a prime beach. Now I have to be honest with you. I have never cheated on my wife, and I never will. I took every word I said to her seriously. Nowhere and never will I find a woman who can compare to Cheryl, and I'm not looking for one. That said, I was beginning to wish we had brought binoculars with us to the beach. I mean, for crying out loud. The beach was full of young taut skin and very little fabric to get in the way. Ben said it best. If the bathroom door is closed, don't even knock. We all knew what he meant and knew we'd be in there sooner or later trying to relieve the stress of this innocent little vacation. It turned out that Bob didn't need our help that first night, or at all. He didn't immediately agree when we first suggested the trip, but once he did, he became a man on a mission. We never had to explain to him the purpose of the trip, other than to hint that he needed to go because as soon as he got there, the hound would break free. The three of us were never in danger of cheating on our wives. We had the confused look of married men who had been out of the game too long, and it could not be changed. Women saw our wedding rings, smiled, walked past us, and asked Bob and Henry to dance. The women flirted shamelessly, and the two men encouraged them. Granted, Henry was a little older and had a few extra pounds, but there were a few older divorcees who treated Henry like a mouse to cheese. Meanwhile, Bob was still a young man in the prime of his life. I swear some of the women who approached him were not even close to coming of age, and we warned him not to hold on to such girls until he was arrested. Apparently, Bob was in pain because he just smiled and took the girls out on the dance floor 2 and 3 at a time. Guys, we are in the presence of greatness. That was all Jason had to say, and we knew it was true. The old married guys, and believe me, that's exactly how we felt, got back to the room around 10 while Bob and Henry were thoroughly enjoying the evening. We were sitting in the living room chatting about nonsense and drinking beer when first Henry and then Bob returned with their companions. We tried to avoid awkwardness, but it was never a problem. Henry's date was a divorced woman named Claire in her 30s. She made small talk for a minute or two, gave Henry a look, kissed us, and followed Henry to his room. "You'll have your own breakfast," was the last thing Henry said as he disappeared out the door. Henry wasn't the kiss-and-tell type, but the walls were thin, and it was soon clear to everyone that he was doing his job. Bob arrived about 30 minutes later. His companion was young and nubile. Truth be told, it took our breath away. She said hello, giggled, and pushed Bob into his room. If Henry was getting his way, Bob was moving heaven and earth. When the enthusiasm coming from behind those two closed doors became too much for us, we retreated each to our own room for some quiet reflection and stress relief. We are, of course, happily married, but we are not immune to what we have heard. I got up early the next morning, took a cold shower, got dressed, and knocked on the doors of the other married men. Each of us had the same idea, to get out of the room before the couples started socializing again. We didn't succeed, and we could hear them as we walked out the front door into the morning sunshine. The three of us, Ben, Jason, and I, spent the day at the beach the way married men have spent it for generations. Long walks along the surf, swimming in the cold ocean, eating lunch while watching all the young cuties, and playing miniature golf. Seriously, we were married, and each of us wanted to keep it that way. When we met up with Bob and Henry later, it seemed that the purpose of our trip had been more than accomplished. Bob's date was gone, leaving Bob with a smile that in no way wanted to disappear, and Henry's date, Claire, was still with him. And she was with him both that night and the next day. Bob, on the other hand, went home that night with another young girl, leaving the three married guys to listen to the rhythms and harmonies of the night. We married guys went to bed early, agreeing that we would go offshore fishing the next day. All the while, we were checking in with our wives. Each of us used the full disclosure approach, which included pictures of our bachelor dinners, beach walks, and miniature golf, promises to our wives that we were on our best behavior, and copious details about the exploits of our single friends. If only we had left it at that. I'm not proud of it, But that second night, we decided to take a short video on one of our cell phones that clearly shows three married guys sitting around doing nothing they should be apologizing for. However, perhaps the point is that we chose a moment when the sounds of passion coming from the two bedrooms were particularly loud. Perhaps the beer played a part in that decision. We sent it to our wives to prove our good behavior. We had a long discussion about it after we got home. To my surprise, the drive home was peaceful. Three of us were desperate to ask questions about things we weren't supposed to know, and these two just sat there smiling like the Cheshire Cat. When I got home, I had a brief but very sincere conversation with my wife. "Did you behave yourself?" "Yes, Mom." "Totally? No kissing, no pawing, no fingers where they don't belong?" "Completely. And to be completely honest, Bob and Henry were so quick to snatch up every available woman that we didn't stand a chance." Okay, even I realized those were the wrong words. My wife looked at me with an unkind look. "It's not that we wanted to. I'm just saying that those two guys inspired us all. I never knew loneliness could be like this." She looked less and less satisfied with each word. "I mean, never mind. If you say you've been on your best behavior, I believe you." She took my hand and started walking. "Now come with me." "Where are we going? I've read all your messages, looked at the pictures from your little vacation, and I think one of us needs to unwind. And you probably do too." "Oh my goodness, how I love this woman." Life is going on as it should. Bob was feeling much better after our vacation at the beach, but Henry's life changed the fastest. I wouldn't recommend marrying a girl you met at a bar for a one-night stand, but Henry was always full of surprises. It turned out that Claire was a keeper of the hearth. For a year after her divorce from her cheating husband, she had been celibate. She took her time getting her life in order after the turmoil of the divorce. She told us that she didn't like going to bars and was never alone. But that night she decided it was time for a little dancing. Somehow she quickly discerned in Henry the caring and patient man we all knew and decided to take him as her wife. They were married a year after our trip to the beach and both seemed completely happy with their decision. Bob's development was a little slower. His rough nights at the beach had knocked something out of his system or restored something he was lacking. Either way, he began to feel whole again and began to treat the bitch the same way we all do. She was a colossal mistake he could put behind him. He dated and slept with random young cuties, seemed to know a thing or two about girls, but generally waited until the divorce was final before embarking on any more serious endeavors. Dating in your 30s was very different from dating in your 20s, and choosing women his own age could be a challenge. A year after his divorce was finalized, he met Marie. She had a son from his first marriage and an ex-husband who had left for parts unknown. His first marriage had taught him to take his time, and her own failed first marriage had taught her to be skeptical of the men she met. But when he introduced her to us, we quickly agreed that this one was no slouch either. Eventually, they settled down and married. Bob adopted Marie's son and is now the only father the boy remembers. To top it off, they have a daughter to add to their family. Bob and Marie have created 4 happy lives where once there was only loss, and they are a joy to be around. Things weren't going so well for the bitch. She married for money, but money doesn't soothe at night. No one but her was particularly surprised, but when you marry a man who has another man's wife, you don't have much integrity. About 2 years after they were married, she caught him having his new secretary just like her. She soon found herself divorced with a full bank account and an empty bed. She was the topic of conversation in our little group for about 20 minutes, with Cheryl, Claire, and Marie showing the most interest in the story. And then our attention returned to the kids, grilled steaks, and good friends. After that, the bitch was forgotten about altogether. In the year between Bob's divorce and his meeting Marie, one of our favorite topics of conversation was a series of convoluted revenge scenarios against the bitch's second husband. He hurt our feelings, and our plans became more complicated with each beer we drank. In the morning, these plans were usually forgotten, and we were free to come up with new, even more fantastical revenge plans to right this disgusting wrong. While we were making plans, his secretary's husband sprang into action, and for this, The offended husband received a 6-month sentence from a sympathetic and apologetic judge. We all agreed that when he was released, it was our sacred duty to take him to the beach for a long weekend where he could discover his potential and find new paths, which we did.